Welcome back to Spring One. I hope everyone is having a great day. So many things to see and so many different tracks to check in on. If you did miss anything, rest your weary heads. We will record all of this amazing conference and you'll be able to see it online at a later date. So definitely check your emails so you make sure to know when all of the videos are posted online. But you're here now, and you're really in for a great treat because one of these next presenters, one of my favorite people, along with presenters in this world that we live in of technology. And I can't wait for you to hear more about the Spring Boot observability from the one, the only, DaShaun Carter. Take it away, DaShaun.
Oh, man, what an amazing intro. Thank you so much, Bob. I'm having a great day already. For all of you that are here, I thank you for being here. I know you have other options, and I know I'm up against some amazing other sessions, but I'm here, and I thank you. I'm going to talk about Spring Boot observability. This is near and dear to my heart. My name is DaShaun. I work at VMware by way of Pivotal. Today is day 800. It's an anniversary for me. And I like to tell stories. So my story from just a few years ago, once upon a time, in a big enterprise, we had a monolith. That was it. We had this big monolith. It was an ear with a bunch of services packed into it that we were deploying, and it was growing. We needed to add more features. We needed to improve it. And we realized that it was hard. We were coming from this place of not being able to deploy more often than we should, 1 or 2 deployments a year. And we knew that we needed to do better. So we moved in the direction of microservices. Docker was becoming a thing. Microservices was definitely a buzzword. And we were trying to take these steps. What we were doing, what we had decided to do, was develop feature releases. So, hey, we're going to add this new feature. Let's put it over here in a separate service so that it doesn't have to touch that monolith. It's still going to interact, but it doesn't have to be deployed at the same time. So we're growing in this different deployment strategy. We have more things that we're deploying to production. And with that came some problems. We were able to show more business value by showing these small releases and getting them pushed out. And we were also moving the ball, more deployments. But with that, we had a new set of problems that we hadn't seen before. Some of that was configuration management sprawl. How do we keep track of what's connected to what's being configured where? We were still running on VMs, hundreds of these VMs across the enterprise. So what we ended up creating was a distributed monolith for ourselves, for lack of a better word. In this session, I want to at least, I'm going to keep it at a one-on-one level. I want to get you started with metrics. I want to tell my story, but just kind of show you how my story relates and how easy it is to move forward. How easy it is to get the benefits of what Spring Boot, Spring Cloud provide out of the box. And tell a story along the way. And at the end, I want you to kind of think about this story, this observability story, before you go to production. That's my goal. The best person to create observability for your application is you. My story that I was referring to, I was still in this time of, I'm going to build my application, I'm going to do all the things I need to do, but I was going to throw it over the wall. Somebody else, another team, assured me that we'll monitor it for you. We'll take care of it. But if you don't know what my app does, you don't know how my app behaves or what its outcomes are, how can you monitor it? How can you tell me if it's behaving correctly or not? In that big distributed system, nobody can decide that better than you. In that big distributed system, pinpointing issues is hard for all of the reasons. We had monoliths and these new microservices and shared databases and some isolated databases, content delivery networks and load balancers, sticky sessions. Where is the problem? What's the root of the problem? This was getting harder and harder. With every new service that we introduced to the environment, we had more complexity. We had more difficulty in finding where those problems were. We found ourselves optimizing for reads on one day and optimizing for writes on the other. Again, we were still running on VMs. At some point, we deployed an APM solution, and that APM solution required agents running on all of those VMs, but we could only afford to do that in production at the time. I didn't have that luxury of the APM system until I got to production. So if I was going to find a bug, I was only going to find it in production. I had this pride of being on call. The bridge calls, the call at midnight on a Saturday night, something fell over, something happened, and we'd wait. And sometimes there was 2, sometimes 4, sometimes 10 or more people on the call waiting for everybody to get their ducks in a row to write their documentation, basically for me to say restart it, or someone else to say just restart it. It's okay. We've checked the box. But I took pride in that. I was okay being the person on that call so that none of my team had to. What else? What other options did I have? Again, we were throwing things over the wall. This was an environment that we didn't have access to. I didn't have the ability to connect a remote debugger. I didn't have the ability to see the JMX beans that were being exposed. I had logs, but only sort of. The amount of information in our huge system, and it was millions of users, we did not have the ability to store the amount of logs that we could actually generate. The only logs that we were able to use and consume as developers, as that development team, were the access logs from production. That didn't help us as much as we needed. So I was on a mission. I was on a mission to be able to go to sleep on the weekends. I was on a mission to help, make it easier so that if I wasn't on call and it was somebody else's job, they had a better way. I had found Drop Wizard on my own. Cool tool, great tool. But I was introduced to Spring Boot. The Actuator was like a dream come true. Spring Boot, this was amazing. That thing on the other side of the wall at the time was a Tomcat instance. My WAR file was being deployed to a Tomcat instance. And if they upgraded from Tomcat x.y to Tomcat x.y.z, and that path changed, my configuration, my deployment scripts had to change with that. But how did I know? I didn't have any visibility. So along with the Actuator, I had this magical Tomcat instance built into my application. And I have made a career and surround myself with people who have made their careers out of making career limiting decisions. I was going to change my deployment scripts. Instead of deploying wars to that Tomcat instance, I was going to deploy my jar file. Make jar not war. I was going to deploy my own jar file that had all the things that I understood and I saw with it. So instead of doing a live demo and live coding for sake of time, I'm going to point to start.spring.io. Hopefully you guys have seen this already. This is where I can go and bootstrap a application. These are the 5 dependencies that I've chosen for this demo. I'm using Lombok. I like to use Lombok for the logging more than anything else. That's the one that I always use it still. I'm using Spring Web because we're just going to create a simple RESTful web service. The Spring Boot Actuator, this is why we're here. This is the thing that changed my life. This is the thing that put me on the Spring Boot path and has kept me here. We're going to talk about Sleuth. We're adding Sleuth, which includes tracing. We'll talk about more. And Wavefront. This is the key. This is the thing that brings it all together, the observability. So you can go here, you can start that and hit generate and build yourself that application using the Initializer, or you can go ahead and go and play along. I've done the exact same thing along with the code that we're about to look at. I've already committed it to my GitHub repo, so you can follow along. The Actuator. This is it. This is the magic. Out of the box, you go to start.spring.io, you add that Actuator dependency to your project. This is what you get. It's great. This right here, just the Actuator health. That's all I needed to see. I was able to go and ask my instance, my one of thousands maybe, my one instance, are you okay? How do you feel? You're up, that's great. And I had a way that I could make that do whatever I wanted. If there was too many connections, if there was latency for the database, I could change that status. I could say, oh, wait, no, I'm not feeling good, or yeah, I'm good, up or down. Just that alone. It made such a difference for me. But there's more. I needed more than that. So what we're going to do in my application, I've made a few changes. So I'm going to jump over to my application and I'll show you those changes. By default, Spring Boot is secure by default. We are going to expose, and this is what I've done, I've exposed all of the endpoints that are available from the Spring Boot Actuator. I'll switch back. So this is what you get by default. There's several more that are available now that I've made them available. So I've got 2 instances running, one that's not exposing it and one that has those changes that I just showed you. So there's lots of these helpful endpoints that are provided out of the box. So even for my Hello World app, which is what we have Hello World. I'm going to scoot back and I'll show you. I've made very few changes here. The application that you generated, I've added this demo controller. This is a REST controller. First step, I'm adding a Hello World, which I've already showed you. Hey, it works. And I've added another update method as well. But we're going to stop right here. I've got a Hello World, just a REST controller. I've got my configuration. I've named my service. The other thing that I want to show you is those metrics. This is the key. It's just magical. Metric is one of the endpoints that's available. And look, these are all of the metrics that actuator exposes. It's very similar to a lot of the other tools that you're going to find in the market. Those tools know how to go in and inspect your JVM to find the information about the app that you're running. That's easy. That's what's exposed. The cool thing is I have the extras. Because I have Tomcat, I have the Tomcat metrics. Because I have included Sleuth, I have Zipkin metrics. Because I have Spring Web, I have HTTP metrics. So at my endpoint where I'm hitting Hello World, I can now go look and I can find out what these values are. Ten HTTP server requests. So now I'll pause here. What I have is a application that I've done very little coding on, that I've added an actuator to. That actuator exposes a lot of these metrics that I didn't have to know their name. I didn't have to go find them. I didn't have to expose them one by one. I got them all. The actuator grabs everything that it can. I also didn't have any other tooling. So there's no other systems that I need to send these metrics to in order to build things and pull things. It's all right here. So as a developer on my laptop, I am able to get the value of this out of the box. So again, I get goosebumps thinking about how big of a deal this was. Not only did I have my application, I was also introduced to start.spring.io. I got my application bootstrapped. I can just think about my application. Now, the cool thing is because these metrics are all coming off of the same port as my application, my Hello World application, same port, I don't have to open any ports. I don't have to do any firewalls. I don't have to do any additional security to get access to these. What we had at the time was we had an internal route. So our 10.network or our 192.network had the ability to say, hey, I will allow traffic from 10. or 192. To see that metrics endpoint, those secure endpoints. But the world, production, the outside world, they did not. So security team was happy. My team was happy. I had this ability to go in and look at each and every instance of my application, from my laptop environment to dev, to QA, to prod. It was all there. Every instance, specific apps, specific metrics. And this was wonderful. This is a great day. But there's more. Like, hey, what's next? Custom metrics. The way that this custom metrics, this alerting, thresholding, observability, the way that really made it click was when I was told about Amazon and the way that maybe it was eBay, it was somebody. The thing that they cared about wasn't CPU. It wasn't memory. It wasn't any of the default metrics. that you would get from a generic system that you threw over the wall. Somebody's going to measure these things that they can see. The important metric for Amazon, let's say, was the number of abandoned shopping carts. That's a metric that's not going to show up in the instance metrics in that default metrics of any of the apps that you're going to deploy with Java. But that's the key. We, as application developers, have to understand, what does our application do? What's its purpose? What is going to make this application successful? How does it behave? We need those custom metrics. So I provided one example of a custom metric. You're going to have to reach and imagine with me a little bit more. This does some really important stuff. I added an update method. That update method, as you can see, it does call another service. But all I'm doing here is I'm generating a random number. I'm going to put that number into a custom metric. I called it Beautiful Wavefront, but it's just a random value. And I'm using that meter registry that I created up here. This meter registry is a part of Micrometer. Micrometer is a vendor-neutral applications metrics facade. So basically, it's an interface that it allows us to plug in metrics collectors. And their tag is think SLF4J, but for metrics. So Datadog or Dynatrace or Prometheus or Wavefront and many others can all be plugged in using Micrometer, which you get out of the box with Spring Boot, and behave the same way. You have a similar experience across the board. So I've created this endpoint. It's going to create that random value, throw it into a meter, and it's also going to call this other service that I started up beforehand. So let's go call that service. And there's my random number. I'm going to go back to my metrics. And I can see now, it's amazing. I have my custom metrics are being exposed. Any of these custom metrics that I put into the Micrometer meter registries are automatically exposed by Actuator. This is gold. This is wonderful. I hope that you are half as excited as I am right now, that I have this ability to not only get the JVM specific or app container specific metrics, but I can have all of my metrics for my instance of my app exposed in the same place. And if I have security in place, as a developer, I can actually diagnose these problems. I don't have to add anything to that production environment in order to get this level of detail. And this is a good thing. Automatically exposed. Now, in a distributed system, sometimes it's important, it's valuable to understand, how does system A talk to system B? How come one instance is taking more load than another instance? Spring Cloud Sleuth is a solution that provides a couple of ways of helping you identify what's happening across your distributed system. For one example, is you can do with logs. Spring Cloud Sleuth can actually add the span ID and the trace ID to your logs so you can correlate. You can say, hey, show me all the log entries that have this same span ID in it. And you can see across your distributed system who is involved, which calls, which services were involved. You can also use tracing with Zipkin or open tracing. Now there's something really, really cool here. Because I'm using the Wavefront Starter that we included here in our Initializer, we get this service for free. What all it does, that endpoint redirects me to Wavefront. This is a SaaS solution that you are getting out of the box, and it's free. The first time that you go, you're going to see this sign, and it explains to you, like, you can use this. As your local developer, you have the ability to go use this and show it and share it and understand how your application behaves. So with that, let's take a look. I've deployed some applications. I called my application, my big A application, that distributed system, all the services that are talking to each other, that's my big A application. I called it beginner friendly. Inside of that big A application, I've got smaller services, demo service, which is the one that I just showed you. And then also there's a Twitter service. I wrote a Twitter service that goes out and it posted a tweet at the start of the session. And when I call update on my service here, it actually sends that value over to the Twitter service, and that Twitter service updated the thread. It updates that thread live. So I have systems calling systems, and that's exposed here. So I've got two services. The great thing is I have all of those same metrics. It's consuming those same metric values, and it's making it more visible because I have web, because I have that web service and that web dependency. I get to see all of the methods that I've called. I get to see those same metrics that are exposed just in a better way. If I'm going to throw myself over the wall and let somebody else do the monitoring and taking care of things, this is a much better experience than letting somebody try to decide what are the thresholds for my application. And there's more. This is kind of the level of detail that you would expect on your local environment. If you were to add one of any number of tools to identify where problems are in your development locally. But there's more. We can see here that it actually detected that there is tracing. So we can go and look at our traces. So my custom metrics show up here, as well as all the other things. So I'm going to go, Wavefront has all of these integrations out of the box. This is a new and improved integration that includes basically if you're sending metrics using that Wavefront starter, you're going to get the value out of this out of the box for free. It'll show you all the applications that you have deployed. It allows you to drill in and look at those instances, look at those issues. I can drill into my service. It allows you to look at all of your services. I can look at the other side as well. And I can see that that application is also collecting metrics. I'm going to go and just browse those metrics for that application, the Twitter service application. And I'm actually deploying those as the Twitter thread. Those are the metrics that I'm exposing. And I can go and look at the number of favorites. So if you go hit favorite on that comment right now, that will jump up. But this is it. I now have this visibility. I now have access to do things like this from the start. So as soon as I go to start.spring.io, as soon as I build my first app and I start running my tests, I have the ability to go in and look and have a dashboard that tells me this is how my application behaves. So there's no excuse from here going forward. You have no excuse to say, why don't I understand how my application behaves? This is the tool. What I want to ask from you is start using this from the beginning. Start thinking about observability from the start. Because you have the tools, the blocks that I had while I was doing development in those days are gone. You have something that you can use on your laptop when you start development. You have something that you can use in dev, QA, and in prod. The best person to create the observability, to show how your application should behave and is behaving in production is you. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you saw some value in how easy it is to get observability in your Spring Boot app with very little effort. And that's it. That's all I have for today. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
All right. DaShaun, thank you so much. Love hearing anything you have to share. And thank you so much for sharing that at Spring One, the largest conference that we have. Over 40,000 people are attending right now. This is incredible. So thank you so much. And I hope every single one of them watched you, DaShaun. That's just my hope. If you have any more questions or you just want to keep talking to DaShaun, head on over to the Slack channel, the Spring One Slack channel. Go to the beginner-friendly tab, and then there'll be a link to the separate Q&A for the Zoom. So DaShaun will be over there waiting to answer any of your questions. We have a really exciting panel coming up 5 minutes at 5 minutes after the bottom of the hour. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking Azure with customers. This is great. I'm really excited to listen to this one too. So thank you again for listening to DaShaun, and stick around and we'll have another great presentation shortly.